Hey, welcome to the archive edition of Chad's Beer Podcast. So in this episode, I'm going to talk to Kevin Burns from thefoaminghead.com, or I should say formerly of that site. Do not go to that site now. It is all, I can't even say on YouTube. I mean, it's a foreign, basically a foreign malware site. I would not go to it. Anyway, when I was putting this episode together, I was trying to remember. I was like, how did Kevin and I meet? I cannot remember. I think it was on MySpace, or I think you guys just emailed me out of the blue, because his website was basically a beer blog, and I had just started doing this show. I didn't start doing the Times Union blog for a couple of years later, but I had chadsbeerreviews.com, and he must have saw that or something. I remember Kevin's goal was his website was meant to cover just New York State beer from Long Island to Buffalo to Plattsburgh, and everywhere in between. I don't know if he succeeded, especially because breweries are popping up in New York so much back then, and they still are as far as I know. Fiden's in Albany is the next treehouse from what I hear. Anyway, so Kevin was on quite a few episodes of this show. I remember I shared Westy 12 with him and Henry. That's a pretty memorable episode. And actually, me, him, and Henry did Old Speckled Hen too. I remember that one. Oddly enough, I don't think me, Jay, and Kevin ever did a review. In fact, I don't think all three of us ever met. I don't know if Jay ever met Kevin. I do not know what happened to him. I remember he said he was trying to become a teacher, a little bit further south towards the city, and we just lost contact. And I tried looking him up on Facebook and LinkedIn and all that stuff, and I can't find him. I mean, he has a very common name. So, Kevin, if you're watching, please message me or leave a comment, because I'd love to catch up with you. Or if anybody knows where he is, let me know. Yeah, so this is a fairly short episode. Again, they're only about 20 minutes. But, yeah, check out Kevin Burns, but not his old website. I'll see you later. Hey, welcome to an episode of Interview with a Craft Beer Enthusiast. Today I'm interviewing Kevin Burns from thefoaminghead.com.
Thanks for having me, Chad.
Yep. Let's start at the beginning. Obviously, people can tell just by looking at you, you're pretty young. How old are you again?
About 24 years old. Turning 25 here shortly.
So when did you start drinking, A, when did you start drinking beer, and B, when did you start drinking good beer?
When I started drinking beer, well before the legal age of 21 was when I started drinking good beer, regular beer. And then good beer was kind of about age 20, 21. I was working in a restaurant, Aromatime Bistro, with my friend Marcus Giuliano, and once I turned the age of 21, he really started to introduce me to better beer. And there's two beers that stick out in my mind. It was the Ommegang Three Philosophers and the Ommegang Hennepin, which were kind of like that light bulb moment.
Right.
Wow, this is good beer. I can drink this type of beer. And if there's only these two beers that taste like it, what else out there could there be? That was about 4 or 5 years ago. What
had you been drinking before that?
Some pretty bad stuff. My idea of good beer was Bud Light, and my idea of a budget beer was it's a lot of Keystone Lights on campus at SUNY Cortland.
So how did the Foaming Head website come about?
The Foaming Head website came down of again, my friend Marcus Giuliano and I. We wanted to create a beer informational site, and that's really where it started. We had no idea what we were going to do, what we were going to focus on, what it was going to be called, but we wanted to do a beer informational website, kind of an encyclopedia. A lot of the big beer websites, your Rate Beer, your Beer Advocate, there's a lot of opinion going on there and a lot of misinformation. They're very useful websites for certain purposes, but they're not 100% factual. So we wanted to do something encyclopedia-like, 100% factual, and we started off doing all sorts of beer. And I said, hey, we like doing local, we like doing local food, we like doing all of that. Let's do local beer. So that was when the decision to do New York State only beer came in. And then, it's like I said, it's kind of like that encyclopedia. Every brewery has its own page that lists its beer, lists when it started, lists its owner, the master brewer, and all of that stuff. And it's evolving even today. Constantly changing.
Right. So. But you also do your own beer reviews on there.
Yep, we do our own beer reviews. It's something that I didn't necessarily want to do. It's the only non-factual website, part of the website, but it is only me. All 200 of those beer reviews have been only me, so it's kind of consistent. And then we've branched out. We have 2 blogs. We have our New York State blog and our American beer blog, because you don't want to restrict yourself to just New York. There's so much good stuff out there.
Right. Now was the New York thing to kind of like corner the market, like nobody else is doing
not necessarily corner the market. It's kind of worked out that way. I don't know of too many other people who have been doing that. There's Lou Bryson, the famous beer writer. He kind of had the Northeast, and he's done books on New York and each individual state. And ever since I've done, there seems to be a little bit of explosion. You don't do New York only, but your focus, you know, you like to do a lot of New York stuff, a lot of Southern Tier stuff. Let me try not to mispronounce his name or forget his name. Lee Williams is another guy who's doing he's doing a New York type thing. And then there's a couple other beer writers, but it has kind of worked out that way. I haven't seen anybody else who combines the beer reviews, the information, all of the stuff we do. So it's worked out that way, and there's a possibility we might branch out in other states in the future.
Speaking of beer reviews, let me pick your brain here a little. When you come to like rating or grading beer, whatever you want to, or judging beer, like what's your criteria? What's your rationale? Like what's, what, all things being the same, like what makes one beer superior to another?
It's interesting, and you and I have talked about this. I've developed my own rating system out of 100 points, and I did a lot of research on this. One of the things people talk about is, how do you rate them 90 points? Can you really judge the difference between 90 and 91?
Right.
So I came up with my own rating system that breaks it down in groups. I'm not going to get too far into it because it is a little complicated. It's on the website, thefoamhead.com, but I have a beer buying guide. And what I set out to do was, when you walk into a beer store, Brew Crew, Beers of the World in Rochester, your Halftime Poughkeepsie, there's over, like 100,000 kinds of brands of beer. How are you going to pick something?
Right.
So, 95% of it is taste, but when you walk in that store, you can't taste anything. So I did 2 points on packaging, what attracts your eye, and 3 points on price. I'd love to drink Trappist ales all day.
So it's not just, it's also like a consumer report
it's because I'm advising you, when you walk in a beer store, a 100-point beer is, you will buy this beer out of that 100,000 brands of beer. But not too much. 5% out of 100, not too much. But hey, what captures your eye? I'd love to drink, West Molly Dubell all day long, but $6, $7 a 12 ounce, it's not going to happen.
Right. But in getting even more into that is like, when you're actually judging a beer, like what do you look for as like if you can break it down by category, taste, aroma,
aroma. I'm looking for something inviting. Something inviting in the aroma. If it smells awful, I might not even make it to drinking. I know you don't smell a beer, you drink a beer, but if it smells that bad, I might not make it to the first sip. Then I break it down to different things, but ultimately, does it taste good? There's other things. Does it conform to a style? I don't want roasted malt characteristics in my Hefeweizen. I'm looking for that citrus, that wheat taste, maybe some brewer's spices. So style guideline, and then once you get into that style guideline, does it taste good? We all come up with these fancy terms and all these characteristics. The bottom line is, does it taste good, and how good? Would you buy it again? Did you enjoy it? It's very simple.
But aren't you grading on a curve then of saying what a style should be? Because aren't some of the best things those that deviate from styles?
Yes and no. Am I grading all Pilsners? And this is a question that all beer reviewers will face.
Right.
If I give a Pilsner a 94, let's say Southampton's Keller Pils, I just had a delicious Pilsner that scored 94 points. Is that a 94%? Is that the best Pilsner? Yes and no. I'm not going to add points. I mean, I try and grade all things. Unfortunately, I haven't run into a beer style that I don't enjoy. I've yet to run into a beer style that I do not enjoy, which might create a conundrum. I know you're not a huge Pilsner fan. Neither is my friend Marcus. We've talked about it a couple times. So, is he biased a little bit? Fortunately, I've been able to avoid that. I've found a beer in every style that I enjoy, and I found every style I enjoy. So, I am getting a style, but also more, do I enjoy it? And I'm very careful to tell my customers that this is my opinion. who knows what I know? I don't know
Right.
too much. Don't let these reviews stop you from buying a beer if you're interested.
Right.
The closest I've come to is I'm not a coffee drinker, and we've seen this explosion of coffee stouts, coffee porters, coffee infused beer.
Right.
I don't dislike the taste of coffee, which has been helpful, but I'm not a coffee drinker.
Right. So I mean, like, don't you think though everybody has their own biases and prejudices? Is like, or is it like something I've run into is when I review a style that I'm not like a huge fan of, is that it's kind of like a way of disclaiming the review. Is like, this style, like, we just shot a Pilsner review, and that's like, I'm not a big fan of Pilsners. Doesn't mean I dislike them across the board. It just means it's not my first choice. So I kind of try to disclaim the review by saying this isn't my preference, but I'm going to try to judge it as fairly as possible. Do you kind of run into that kind of thing?
I think everybody has a bias, you know, whether it comes with style, whether it comes with, I just had something from this particular brewery last week and it was either phenomenal or terrible, and I'm carrying that in my mind to this next beer that they're making. The label, again, do you know what style it is? Do you know who it's being brewed by? Was it given to you by free? You know, we've each had some brewers and breweries send us stuff for free. Are you hesitant to knock that beer if it's a god-awful beer? Are you too eager to praise it? Everybody's going to have those biases. And these beer reviews now, it's a hobby. They're all over. There's countless beer review websites. It's important to remember that that is one person's opinion.
Speaking of which, who's some other people, either on YouTube or the web in general, who you like?
Oh, there's
other beer reviews.
There's so many names. I want to get myself in trouble. I like watching your beer reviews, not just because you're able to feature
I totally
me.
set them up for that.
You know, Lou Bryson is a guy I look up to. I said he started that stuff. He doesn't necessarily do beer reviews, but I do like reading anything he'll write on a beer. The late great Michael Jackson, some of his classics. I love reading. You know, Jay Brooks, he's out on the West Coast. Again, a lot of these guys don't necessarily do beer reviews. As beer reviews, I like watching all the guys on YouTube. You, Jay, that whole crew. I like reading Blake, the New York Brew Authority, the brewauthority.com. He has some nice stuff. I love reading beernews.org. They're not a beer review site, but they're so good at releasing the details of new beers coming out that it helps us beer reviewers. I know what to look for. They seem to get stuff before everybody.
Do you you subscribe to any beer magazines?
Yeah, I subscribe to Beer Advocate. I don't quite subscribe to the Ale Street News or the Yankee Brew News. I seem to be able to pick those up wherever I go, whether it's a bar at Mahar's or here in Albany. I think Pump Station has them. But I read tons of material. I am constantly reading on material, and there's too many websites to name, so I apologize if I forgot any.
Kind of getting back to one of my earlier questions is, and I think you pretty much already answered it, but it's like, you love beer, I love beer. There's a lot of people out there that love beer, but to go above and beyond, like if you go on Rate Beer Advocate, like there's what, thousands, maybe a million members of just, I'm gonna write like a 1-paragraph blurb and put it on this website. For you and me, it's like we're saying that's not good enough. I want to do video reviews. I want to have up my entire website. What was like your impetus behind that? Like, just doing a blurb on Rate Beer Advocate isn't good enough. I want to put my face out there.
Well, I think for me, it's a hobby. It's it's the same hobby I have with sports, the same hobby I have with coaching and all that stuff. It's a hobby. It's something I want to do, and the one thing with craft beer for me is it's still beer and it should still be enjoyed. And sometimes I find myself battling between enjoying a beer and taking it too far. You know, you see a lot of these bars have come up with these programs now, these frequent drinker programs, and you get a prize.
Like Mahar's.
And they're so cool because they encourage exploration, they encourage you to try different beers. But I've seen people like ordering a beer, pounding it, checking off their list and going back, and you can find yourself in a fine line. You know, craft beer fan, that term fan is fanatic. It's still something that should be enjoyed. You know, every once in a while I'll send out a tweet craft beer lovers, have a craft beer, don't rate it, don't just enjoy it. So it's a fine line between doing something you love, getting that information out to people, and taking it too far, you know, and drinking beer just to get another notch on your beer list belt, and getting another review. So I'd say I hit 13,000 beer reviews, which is scary. Some of those people have those big numbers, but it's that fine line, you know. Am I enjoying it as a hobby, as a passion of mine? Have I taken this too far?
Right. Something I always like to ask beer drinkers is, especially people that actually go above and beyond and review beer like we do, are you of the opinion that it's like a fact in general that certain beer is better or superior to other beers, or is it in person, individual by individual taste? Like when we go on Rate Beer and Fabricate, like they have a list of the greatest beers ever made in the history of time. I always say like it's all based on opinion, and other people say, but it's opinion based on knowledge and experience, which in turn makes it factual. So, do you think it's a fact or is it opinion, somewhere in between?
I think obviously it's personal. Now I certainly like my Dogfish 90 minute more than I like my Bud Light, and that's a fact for me. That'll never change. Right. But to try and convince somebody who loves a Bud Light or a Budweiser or a Chorus that this is better, it's never going to work. Right. I think it is personal. I think obviously, you know, you want to say, is there a consensus? Well, yeah, in the craft beer world, there's a consensus that Dogfish is better than Bud Light. I could get you to agree with that. I could get any of my other craft beer friends, but not on the whole. If we took a poll of all Americans, that's not going to be anywhere near the case. So I think it's always opinion. I think you want to be aware of that. You always want to, you know, if you're a Bud Light drinker, my advocacy, you know, a beer advocate, the same thing they're based on, is to try and sway you over. Right. Because I think a lot of the reason that people like that stuff, in my opinion, is that they haven't been exposed. Right. Because I was one of those people drinking Keystone Light and Bud Light.
Yeah, along those lines is, how do you witness or proselytize for a craft beer, and how do you avoid snobbery? Or is snobbery justified?
I think there's a difference, I like to call this. There's being a beer geek, and there's being a beer snob. Right. Being a beer geek is very cool. Right. You advocate the beer, you drink the beer, you visit the brewery. Being a beer snob is not cool. Right. You know, if you like Bud Light, more power to you. And especially more power after you try something that I've given you in that lager pilsner style, because I'm not going to start you out with an Imperial Stout. Say, here, why don't you try this Victory Prima Pils or something like that. Right. After that, if you still don't like it, then more power to you. And that's where beer geek and beer snob kind of stop. I see a lot of bars, you know, don't drink the fizzy yellow stuff, no crap on tap. Well, if somebody wants, well, Rattle and Hump's great bar, I've seen that at multiple things. If somebody wants to drink that, more power to them. I'm obviously going to try and open their eyes, expand their eyes, and if that doesn't work, it doesn't work. Beer snob is telling me, you know, here, you like Bud Light, why don't you try this Pilsner? Beer snob, that's beer geekery. Beer snobbery is saying, here, this scored 100 points. You know, the brewer's not brewing that beer for that 100
And then your opinion is incorrect.
Yeah, you know what? Some beers, your Trappist Abbey ales are meant to drink warm. If I like it cold, let me drink it cold. That's how I enjoy it, and that is the purpose of beer, is to enjoy it.
Have you won over a lot of, like, you're a bartender at Aroma Time, have you found yourself winning over people, or at least getting them on track?
Yeah, I find it's a lot easier to me, as a bartender, to win people over, as opposed to walking up to somebody at a beer festival and going, put that down, that's terrible, try this. Yeah. And at Aroma Time, it's easier because we don't have those big beers. So somebody will walk in and say, can I have a Budweiser? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have it. So they don't have an option. They have to try something else. And I can point them in the way of a Pilsner or a Lager. I love those gateway beers. Right. People love to knock, and the breweries might even knock me for calling them gateway beers, but I'm going to call them gateway beers. Your Sam Adams, your Saranaks. Yeah. People have seen those in the grocery store. Magic Hat, the Red Hoax, all those bigger craft breweries that have been doing it for a long time, that are big enough now to have that wide distribution. I've seen this in my grocery store, and they don't make mostly Imperial stuff. Saranac makes 30 odd beers. They make 2 Imperial beers. Right. You know, they're they're shooting for the middle.
Right.
Sam Adams, I'd say they're desperately trying to hang on to their craft beer status. They're about to lose that just because of some silly definition. They shoot for the middle and the high, and that's something that's not over. It's not a double imperial IPA. It's not a tactical nuclear penguin. It's
Right.
40% alcohol. It's not going to scare anybody off. And those beers are so useful. And I think they get undersold. You're even Sierra Nevada because they're not tiny, they're not micro, they're not retro, they're not trendy. But we would never get other people's beers without those beers. And I think they, you know, they were some of the oldest. They're the forefathers. They deserve proper respect, and I love those breweries.
Right. Just kind of end on a personal note here. Like, what's like your? I know you said you try not to bias towards any particular styles. I know. Actually, you said it on this show many times is that you're not a hophead. I am. What's like your maybe top 5 favorite styles, and then like your top 5 personal favorite beers?
And this is such a tricky question. Everybody always asks me this, and I always say, well, it depends. What's the weather like? What's my mood?
Right.
What have I been drinking?
What's the season?
So let's stick with this season. It's the summer.
Right.
So I'm sorry to my stouts, my Trappist, and my Abbeys, all those things. In the summer, I'm probably drinking a Kolsch style. It's a
Right.
not new, it's a very old style, but it's emerging craft brewers. Kolsch style, any type of wheat beer, your Hefeweizens, even your dark Hefes, your Crystalweizes, Pilsners, lagers, and Sassons.
Right.
I love a really, really good Sasson. Your Funk House. Ommegang has perfected that.
Isn't it
Their
Saison?
Hennepin. Saison, Sasson. So let's go with that. Let's go with Kolsch, wheat, lagers, pilsners, and Sasson, Saisons, however you want to pronounce it. As far as 5 beers, there's too many. I am a New York beer website guy, so I'm going to stick with New York beers.
But there's a Southern Tier on that list.
There should be. You know what? I'm going to switch up, man. I'm going to throw it back at you. I think I'm going to go with my top 5 breweries.
Right.
Brooklyn, Ommegang, Southern Tier, Captain Lawrence, and I'm forgetting some. There's over 60, we're up near 70 breweries. I'm trying to remember them all off the top of my head and recognize them.
Browns, Keegan Ales.
Brooklyn, Southern Tier, Ommegang, Captain Lawrence. There's somebody else in that 5. So I'll pick 5. I'll pick 4 or 5 from there. Ommegang, that Hennepin, is fantastic. Southern Tier, any of their Imperial series, they're all phenomenal. That Krampus Imperial Lager was really nice. The Unearthly was phenomenal. Captain Lawrence, their Liquid Gold is phenomenal. Their Captain's Reserve Double IPA is out of this world. Brooklyn, let's go with the Brown Ale. I love the Brooklyn Brown Ale.
I like the Schneider
I
Hopfen.
mean, again, they make dozens of great brews. I think that Brown Ale is a classic for me.
Yeah. I guess that about wraps it up. Why don't you plug your websites?
TheFoamingHead.com is the main website. We also have 2 blogs. They're linked on the homepage. They're long URLs. And also Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that stuff. You can find me as The Foaming Head.
All right. Thanks, Kevin, for doing the interview. And go check out his websites and right here on YouTube. So thanks again.
Thanks, Chad.
And we'll see you guys in the next interview. Bye.